Hello, my name is Father Gregory Pine, and let's see, I'm a Dominican friar of the province of St. Joseph. Got it, nailed it. And this is Pines with Aquinas, double nailed it. In this video, we're going to talk about anger, the reason for which, why would we talk about anger? Well, I think that here we are in the 21st century, in the year something, and we have many reasons for which to be angry, and oftentimes we don't know what to do with our anger, and then that gets us all bound up, sad, anxious, whatever. So yeah, maybe just talk about it, talk through it, and then talk about some remedies for it, and we can go from there. Boom. All right, so in talking about anger, I think it's good to start at the level of emotion or the level of passion. So when St. Thomas describes the principles of the moral life, he says, you got some things that you share with the animals, you got some things that you don't share with the animals, right? So some things that are particularly human. And when talking about those things that we share with the animals, he talks about passions, because on his understanding, this is just like a part of our sense appetite. So on account of the fact that we are embodied, right, we have certain desires to like eat and drink and have sexual intercourse, for instance. And with that, there are certain movements of the soul which accompany our experience of reality. All right, so speak more concretely, Father Gregory. Okay, I will do that. So you see something out there. For instance, let's think about a food item that is delicious. I live in Switzerland, and Swiss people like fondue. I will not say whether or not I like fondue. And so, a Swiss person is toddling down the street. They pass by whatever restaurant, the Café du Midi, and they look in the window and they see fondue. And the way in which that food stuff registers is as fitting for them. Okay? So they see it, they're like, check it out, fondue. I could have some fondue. All right, and that basic response we call love. All right, so obviously love has more exalted versions, but at root, at base, you have a kind of sense cognition of a thing, and that sense cognition gives rise to a sense appetite. And the bedrock of sense appetite is love. So love is just that thing out there fits me. Okay, it fits my nature. It fits who I am, and it's going to help me to flourish as a human being. And so love, begets desire, and then when you have the thing, it begets delight or joy. On the flip side, you have hatred. Hatred gives rise to aversion, and then if the thing, eventually visits itself upon you, it gives rise to sorrow. Now, those basic movements of our sense appetite, those basic passions, pertain to what St. Thomas Aquinas calls the concupiscible power. You're like, wow, concupiscible, that sounds awesome. It is. All right, so these would be like simple passions or simple movements of the sense appetite, whereby we see a thing and we just kind of either pursue it or not. So there's the simplicity actually would just be a simplicity of movement. It's either towards or from without too much hemming or hawing. But St. Thomas also identifies a second dimension of our sense appetite, which he calls the irascible power. Okay, so you recognize the word irascible is related to the word irate, so it has something to do with anger. You see where this is going. All right. Now, with the irascible power, we're dealing with passionate responses of a more complex sort. So let's say, for instance, that same, Swiss person is toddling down the street, and they see, the Café du Midi, but on the front door it says 2G plus, and they're like, oh my gosh, that means that either I have to be vaccinated or I need to be, what's the other thing? I need to have been recovered, but if recovered, then I have to get a test. So let's say that this person is either neither of those or recovered, and then thinks about the prospect of getting a test and how much it costs, and they're like, but I really like fondue. Okay, so it's not just a matter of like see, enter, eat. Now it's a matter of like see, think through, evaluate, plan, take it, yada yada, this and such. All right, so it's more difficult. All right, and in this irascible power, if you're trying to get to a good thing, but you have to overcome some obstacle, we call that hope. If you're trying to get to a good thing, but you look at the obstacle and say, I can't overcome that, we call that despair. If you're trying to get away from a bad thing, all right, and you're like, let me go for it, we call that daring. If you're trying to get away from a bad thing, but you fear that you can't, we call that fear. This leaves one remaining of those basic 11 passions that St. Thomas describes, and it's the subject of this video. You're like, finally, we've arrived. So the last is anger. So anger basically describes when there is an evil thing which has visited itself upon me, but there's a kind of complexity to the evil. Because basically the complexity is this evil thing that has been visited upon me is an injustice, all right? It is an injustice that requires vindication. So I'm toddling down the street, okay, and I pass by somebody and they spit on me. And I'm like, holy smokes, that person just spit on me. Now, this person apparently has a bad history with Dominicans because, I don't know, like they were once involved in an ultra marathon in Canton Bern where they like ran to the top of the Eiger or something like that, and they were beaten by a Dominican, and ever since then they've just, sworn a blood feud against all Dominican friars. And I'm like, listen, I'm not entering in any ultra marathon anytime soon. Like, what are you doing? But they're like, I hate Dominicans. I hate every last one. It's like, whoa, savage. Okay, so I feel like I've been done an injustice. So I've been spat upon just because I pertain to the same religious order as another human being who happened to beat this individual in a completely fair race to the top of a mountain in who cares where, all right? And so that produces in me like a kind of confusion, but also a desire, a movement of the soul to vindicate my rights as a human being. I'm like, you spat on me. You should unspit on me, realizing that that's not possible. I'm like, hey, you should apologize. Also, you should offer to have my Kappa dry cleaned because I was given this thing as a gift like 7 years ago and I've never once washed it. And it's not looking good, okay? So I might take this as an opportunity. Okay, maybe that's going too far. But you see what I mean, all right? So it's an experience of an injustice that moves out towards vindication. Now, when we think about anger, it exists for a reason, all right? And this is an important piece of our description of the passions. They're not morally good or morally evil. They just are, right? They morally are. They become morally good or they become morally evil to the extent that they're informed by habits, all right? So if they're informed by virtue, then they become morally good. If they're informed by vice, they become morally evil. So for us, it's not a matter of just rooting out anger whole and entire. It's for us a matter of growing in virtuous habits which inform our anger and channel them to a good end. So when you suffer an injustice, I think it's good to experience it as injustice because it motivates you to vindication, especially when that vindication is necessary. So let's say that your rights are just getting run over all the time by like a local politician or a state politician or a national politician, like a federal politician. That anger shouldn't just, kind of turn black in your heart. It shouldn't just manifest itself in, like profuse swearing every time you watch the news. It should actually move out towards activity. And that's the logic of anger, okay? And here, this is kind of getting on towards spiritual counsel. I think it's good to work through anger in a way that takes the edge off it, or I think it's good to work through anger kind of simply and innocently. Oftentimes when we get angry at something, we're like, I need to interiorize this. I need to, evaluate this. But truth be told, sometimes it's simply better to say like, I'm angry about this thing. Let's resolve it. Okay. Because for instance, let's say your friend offends you and the friend doesn't know that she offended you. And then you go and you get all angry and your heart turns black. And then you present the fact that you were angry to your friend like 3 days later. If I'm that friend, I'm going to be like, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't realize that. But you just tell me next time. Just tell me, right? Because when I'm confronted by somebody who has an angry problem with me that they've been brooding over for a few days, I'm like, why? Like we could have just talked this through. We could have troubleshot this together. Why did we permit it to become black in your heart? Why did you think apart from me, your friend, when we could have thought about this together, which is the very point of our friendship, right? To have a common life and a common conversation. So when it comes to anger, we want to affirm it as at root part of our genuine human experience, albeit our experience that we share with the beasts, but something that can be drawn into the life of reason, something that can be humanized by the influx of virtue, right? And there are a couple of virtues which inform our anger, one of which is called meekness, right? Which kind of tempers our anger because there's a recognition that anger often goes too far and it can cloud our judgment, all right? And then there's another called clemency, which moderates the vindication that we seek to gain. All right, so it moderates the punishment that we mete out. So I think it's good to pray for both of those virtues, to recognize the fact that anger is very difficult to pull off in a virtuous way. And so, to introduce a kind of reflex principle of maybe epistemic humility, where we're like, I'm really angry, but I'm often wrong about these things. So I should dial it down and then present it in as simple and in as innocent a way as I can. But with the recognition that anger is to be moved upon, all right? Not always and everywhere, but at least sometimes, especially if it means vindicating the rights of Christians, vindicating the rights of your family, standing up for your friends, standing up for the faith, whatever it might be. Anger has a place in your life, all right? And just because maybe, you don't want to end up being a gossip, or just because maybe you don't want to end up complaining too terribly much, you're of the mind that it is better repressed or suppressed than shared. I would encourage you to find healthy, good, simple outlets for your anger. Maybe that's ultra marathoning, okay? Maybe that's having somebody on whom you can kind of lay your burdens with the recognition that person's not going to judge you and they're going to give you good counsel about how to proceed in it. But find some way to work through it and find some way to direct that anger to its term, to direct it to its goal, and to bring about a world that is more just. Ultimately, we'll be disappointed by the justice that is realized in this present evil age, but it will prepare us in seeking vindication for a life in which justice attains to its perfection, that ultimate horizon of vindication in the life of heaven. Boom. That, my friends, is what I wanted to say in this video. So cheers. Yeah, if you haven't yet, please do subscribe to Pints with Aquinas. Push the bell, get emails. Every time you open them, you can go, an email, and just scare everyone in your immediate vicinity. And then if you haven't yet, please do check out Godsplaining, which is a podcast of the Dominican Friars of the Province of St. Joseph, to which I contribute. GODSPLAINING. YouTube, podcast app, all kinds of places, plural. Yep, and all kinds of good things. So that's it. That's all I got. My prayers are for you. Please pray for me, and I will catch you next time on Pints with Aquinas.